Coming up on Early Edition at 6, topic budget 2015 deadline December 2nd. Lawmakers lock horns with different takes on how the money would be best spent. Another issue that lawmakers don't see eye to eye, taking action against civic groups. Opposition lawmakers voice concerns that the continued flying of anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the border is playing a big role in souring inter-Korean relations. China begins to take more decisive action against North Korea, a move that earns Beijing the trust of Seoul and Washington in pressuring the reclusive regime to denuclearize. Stay tuned for these and more.
It's 6 p.m. on a brand new Monday here in Korea. Thank you for joining us at this hour. This is Daniel Choy.
And I'm Hwang Ji-hye here in Seoul. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. We begin at Korea's National Assembly, where lawmakers are tasked with a very important duty this week, and that is reviewing the next year's budget.
But the rival parties are already locking horns again on whether the budget plan is sufficient for boosting the ailing domestic economy. Our Ji Myung-gil starts us off.
Discussions on next year's budget have begun at the National Assembly, with the ruling and opposition parties promising to pass it by the legal deadline of December 2nd. The 2015 budget calls for a 5.7% on-year increase in government spending to some $350 billion.
We must meet the legal deadline, as it is our last best opportunity to boost Korea's economy.
The ruling Saenuri party says the budget promoted by the government as necessary for boosting the economy must be kept intact. But the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy has been stepping up its attacks on the government's recent expansionary fiscal and monetary policies, promoting its own plan instead.
We have 5 principles set for next year's budget: endorsing financial health for the central and local governments, restoring corporate taxes for conglomerates, increasing household income, and securing a bigger budget for safety-related purposes.
Compounding concerns about the increased budget plans, the government has been facing a shortfall of tax revenue since 2012. According to the Finance Ministry, the government collected $126 billion in national tax revenue from January to August, which is down to $178 million from the same period last year. And while both parties are speaking in optimistic terms about the budget being passed by December 2nd, Korea's parliament is notorious for its year-end budget wars. No budget bill has been passed by the legal deadline since 2002. However, that won't be the case this year, as parliamentary law revisions made last year mean the draft proposal will be automatically referred to the regular session on December 1st, even if the rival parties don't reach an agreement on the bill. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Staying at the National Assembly, anti-Pyongyang leaflets and delay in the transfer of wartime operational control topped the agenda at Monday's interpellation session. Answering questions from lawmakers, Prime Minister Chung Hong-won expressed regret over North Korea's refusal to hold high-level talks in protest of anti-Pyongyang leaflets by South Korean activists. Chung reiterated that the government has no legal grounds to stop the groups from sending the flyers. The recent agreement between South Korea and the United States to delay the transfer of wartime operational control from Washington to Seoul was another hotly debated issue. As part of efforts for a stronger deterrence against the North, Chung said it was the right decision to delay the OPCON transition until Pyongyang drops its nuclear weapons program. And over in North Korea, where pressure to denuclearize is mounting, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says China is putting stronger pressure on the North than it was a year ago, citing trade restrictions. Our Kim Min-ji has the details.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has praised China for doing more to pressure North Korea. Speaking with Bloomberg News, Kerry said the Chinese were taking measures beyond the ones they were a year ago. He cited examples such as China reducing the amount of jet fuel being exported to the north and additional limitations being placed on trade. Kerry also noted that Chinese President Xi Jinping has held at least 5 meetings with South Korean President Park Geun-hye, but none with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Seoul and Washington have long called on China, North Korea's only major ally, to play a greater role in getting Pyongyang to demonstrate a willingness to give up its nuclear weapons. But Beijing had been accommodating toward the north in fear of hurting Chinese national interests. Kerry added that there's still an uncertainty as to where the North Korean leader wants to take his country and that this view is shared by China. The top U.S. diplomat also said Washington is as keen as Beijing to restart the long-stalled six-party talks on the North's denuclearization, but stressed the U.S. needs assurances that Pyongyang is prepared to discuss scrapping its nuclear weapons. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
And while there are calls to Pyongyang to return to the negotiating table, German lawmaker Hartmut Korschik, a longtime advocate for Korean unification, says North Korea actually wants to talk to South Korea. Korschik was in Pyongyang for 6 days recently and held talks with the chairman of the Supreme People's Assembly and North Korea's vice foreign minister. Our Hwang sat down with Mr. Korschik for a chat.
When you talked to North Korean officials during your stay there, what did they say about inter-Korean relations?
Many of the North Korean officials I spoke with were very clear. North Korea hopes to improve relations with South Korea. The attendance of 3 high-level officials at the closing ceremony of the Asian Games shows this very well. They said rebuilding trust is the most important step for improving South-North relations. As the basis for trust building, they referred to former South Korean President Kim Dae-jung's visit to North Korea in 2000 and the June 15th joint statement that followed.
There are speculations about the regime instability in North Korea. What was your impression?
Of course, Kim Jong-un's power cannot be compared to that of his father, Kim Jong-il, in his prime, but he has enough leverage to control the current situation. The power is not held solely by him, though. It is divided among other agents, such as the party, the military, or the economic bodies. But Kim is able to maintain a balance among them. However, I do see a need for a policy to promote overall stability.
So before your visit to Pyongyang, you also visited China and you met with officials there. Did you have any talks about North Korea with them?
There are tensions between North Korea and China. China wants North Korea to return to the six-party framework and to pursue more reform measures on its own. But at the same time, its biggest interest is securing stability in North Korea and on the Korean Peninsula. Therefore, Beijing is not opposed to Pyongyang's relations with Europe and Berlin, and China believes its friendship with South Korea is helpful in maintaining stability on the Korean Peninsula and in Northeast Asia.
You've been a long-time advocate of the unification of the two Koreas. In your view, what's the biggest hurdle to the Korean unification, and how do we make that leap?
The challenge can be largely divided into 2. First is solving the dire humanitarian situation in North Korea. The second and the most important and difficult task is North Korea's nuclear program. The neighboring countries must also be considered. A fundamental step is resolving tensions between the two Koreas, but at the same time seeking understanding from the United States, China, and Japan remains a challenge.
And where does Germany come in?
Germany will not be a mediator. It will also not be a master that can offer a great deal of knowledge. But what we can do is to give little bits of advice based on our own experience with unification.
Thank you, Mr. Korschik, for your time today.
It was a pleasure for me.
Moving on to other stories, Korea and the Netherlands signed a number of deals today. The two sides can expect to strengthen cooperation in the areas of nuclear energy, scientific research, and agriculture. During King Willem Alexander's state visit to Seoul, the two sides officially put pen to paper on an agreement for the 19 million euro, or roughly $23 million Dutch research reactor project that a Korean consortium won an order for in June. Korea and the Netherlands also agreed to work together in research of the human brain, agriculture, and food. Welcoming the Dutch King and Queen, President Park anticipated greater cooperation between the two countries and across a number of economic sectors. Korea's biggest conglomerate, Samsung, is trying to restructure in the face of their ailing chairman, Lee Gun-hee. One of Samsung Group's oldest founding companies is set to go public by the end of this year, setting the stage for more Samsung affiliates to quickly follow suit. This also paves the way for Samsung Electronics to establish a holding company early next year. Our Song Ji-sun has the details.
Choy Industries, the mother company of Samsung Group that was founded 6 decades ago, is going public. Choy filed for an initial public offering of around $50 per share to the Financial Supervisory Service on Friday, with plans to go public on December 18th, earlier than the market forecast of the first quarter of next year. Samsung's IT services subsidiary, Samsung SDS, also filed for an IPO next Friday, with a starting stock price of $185 per share. Market analysts view this as a means of speeding up the group's restructuring to found a Samsung Holdings company that could eventually shore up control for the conglomerate's family members. One of the most plausible scenarios is that Samsung Electronics splits in two in the first quarter of next year, with one becoming a holdings company and merging with Choy Industries. Now, why go through with this process? Because this way, the heir apparent to the Samsung throne, Lee Jae-yong, who owns a quarter of Choy Industries' share as its biggest shareholder, can minimize inheritance taxes with his share of Choy stocks dropping to 8%. At the same time, he increases the influence in Samsung Electronics as his current share of 0.6% jumps to that same level. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Korea and China have agreed to conduct joint surveillance in the West Sea to crack down on illegal fishing by Chinese nationals in Korean waters. Korea's Fisheries Ministry said Monday that the two countries will begin patrols before the end of this year. Talks on the issue were delayed after a Chinese fishing boat captain was killed last month in a clash with Korean Coast Guard officials who had raided the vessel. It's the latest in a series of violent incidents between the two sides in recent years. In 2011, a Korean Coast Guard official was stabbed to death during a raid. Over 1,800 Chinese boats have been seized for illegal activities within Korea's exclusive economic zone in the last 5 years. And Korean companies will be able to start selling leftover electricity through a new exchange market beginning November 25th. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy says some businesses could save up to $5,500 a year using the so-called negawatt system. It's about selling leftover energy to the Korea Electric Power Corporation, which then disperses it to others. Businesses with office buildings and plants are eligible to participate in the exchange market, but not individual households. 11 companies, including Korea's largest telecommunications operator KT, said they will participate in the negawatt market this year. 8 others said they will start next year. Now, if you could travel to any place in the world, where would you go? For Koreans, the answer has been, and it looks like it always will be, Europe. In a survey conducted by the travel site Expedia on 1,000 working men and women in their 20s to 40s, more than 34% picked Europe as the top destination for traveling without a package deal. Coming in second place with 30% of the votes was Southeast Asia, including countries like Thailand and Singapore. Places closer to home came in third, with 27% of the voters opting for Taiwan, Japan, or China.
Korea's favorite and #1 messaging application, Kakaotalk, is stretching its boundaries and aiming to go global, backed by new services and its recent merger with the country's second-largest internet portal operator, Daum. But will it be enough to win over consumers outside of Korea? Shin Se-min has this week's industry insight.
9 out of 10 smartphone users in Korea use Kakaotalk, the country's #1 mobile messaging service. In Korea, you don't say I'll text you, you say I'll Katalk you. But it's not stopping there. The services Kakaotalk offers are expansive and growing all the time. Users can send small amounts of money, go shopping, and even send gifts and vouchers. Kakaotalk is also able to connect small businesses with their customers. Soon, it aims to roll out features that allow users to call a taxi and control their home appliances, and even help drivers find an empty parking spot.
We already have a solid platform here at Kakao, but we never stop innovating, and extra features are in the works all the time. By making use of Daum's established portal, we're looking to provide more state-of-the-art services that will eventually be used in our daily lives.
Those state-of-the-art services will come with the pairing of Kakao and the nation's second-largest internet portal, Daum Corporation, this year, and from going public last month. Daum Kakao currently has a market capitalization of over $7 billion, making it one of the country's largest IT firms. Under its new slogan, Connect Everything, Daum Kakao is hoping to lead the march to have everything connected to the internet. A personalized location-based service is under development, drawing on the strength of each arm of the business. By utilizing Daum's pre-existing and highly detailed map service, Kakaotalk hopes to launch a feature that notifies users when they're near a restaurant chain or clothing store they like. However, challenges lie ahead, namely convincing international consumers to make the jump to Kakaotalk.
Daum Kakao missed the boat for entering the global market. Countries already have their preferred messaging services. In China, they like WeChat. Line is in Japan, and WhatsApp has a grip on the US. It's going to be really hard for Daum Kakao to squeeze in between.
The company also has problems at home due to a privacy scandal. A significant number of users abandoned Kakaotalk for foreign messaging applications like Germany's Telegram, following the revelation that the Korean company had given prosecutors access to thousands of users' private conversations. But Kakao's strength, analysts point out, is in its user-friendly services. Whether that ultimately translates into success on the global stage remains to be seen. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Moving on to some international news, an apparent suicide blast near Pakistan's only border crossing with India has killed at least 55 people and left around 120 wounded. The deadly explosion took place on Sunday in Wagah, a town on the border, following a daily flag-lowering ceremony that draws hundreds of people on both sides. Pakistanis were hit with the brunt of the attack as it took place 500 meters on their side of the border. Dozens of people use the crossing every day as it serves as an important trade route. The Pakistani Taliban has claimed responsibility for Sunday's strike. A United Nations panel has issued a stark warning on global climate change, saying greenhouse gas emissions must be phased out within the next 85 years. If they aren't, the implications could be catastrophic. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The United Nations climate body is warning that time is not on our side to stop soaring temperatures, making the world unlivable. Launching the latest study from the Environmental Panel on Climate Change, the UN said the world faces severe, widespread, and irreversible effects if moves are not made to completely stop using fossil fuels by 2100. It says the use of low-carbon sources needs to rise from 30% of electricity generation now to more than 80% by the middle of the century to limit rising temperatures.
The window of action is really closing very rapid. If you look at the total carbon budget to ensure that temperature increase by the end of this century will not exceed 2 degrees Celsius, we've already used up a substantial share of this.
Scientists say a rise of 2 degrees Celsius is the level at which the dangerous impacts of climate change will be felt. But the IPCC says the world is at risk of temperatures soaring by 4.8 degrees or even higher by 2100 if things continue as they are.
So this clearly shows that we have a very limited window of opportunity, and I think the global community must look at these numbers and show the resolve by which we can bring about change.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon also stressed the need for action before it's too late.
Inaction of climate action will cost much, much more. This climate action and economic growth are two sides of just one coin.
The IPCC study will be the main handbook for 200 nations when they meet for a global summit on climate change in Paris late next year. China, the United States, the EU, and India are the world's biggest greenhouse gas emitters. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Well, I heard you can change the number of Korean items on UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage list again.
Yes, and 17 is the new number. The latest earned the nod of approval is 농악,
a traditional Korean form of music, as certified by the numerous active musicians respected and loved the world over. It looks like Koreans have a knack for song and dance.
I know, exactly. So no wonder we have so many audition reality programs with with diamonds in the rough that continue to take the viewers' breath away with their talent.
I get goosebumps just thinking about it. Well, coming back to 농악, it's a type of traditional Korean music that served a purpose.
Farmers played this music to encourage cooperation during the busiest times of the year. Our Connie Lee introduces us to the world of 농악.
Drums, gongs, parading, dancing, and acrobatic feats. It's all part of what is called 농악. It's traditional Korean music that was originally performed by farmers in the early 1900s. Scholars say it was first introduced during the Japanese colonization of Korea. 농악 was performed in groups to encourage one another to work better in the fields and to help them overcome the difficulties of agricultural life. But today, it is a popular performing art seen all around Korea, especially during the holidays. And in the coming weeks, this art is set to be tapped as a UNESCO intangible cultural heritage. This after a UNESCO deliberative body made a unanimous decision to recommend 농악.
The unanimous recommendation is a very rare case. This is a great opportunity to share with the world the significance of 농악.
In a report on the deliberation, UNESCO says the music is characterized by vitality and creativity, providing performers and audiences with a sense of identity. The final decision will be made at the end of this month during a meeting at UNESCO's headquarters in Paris. Officials, however, say it is most likely that 농악 will be added to UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage list as Korea's 17th item. Others on the list include Korea's folk song Arirang and kimjang, or the making and sharing of kimchi. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Now the weather, we got off to a rather cold start to the week here in Korea.
Yes, and I hear that first snow of the season fell on Mount Halla over in Jeju. For more, we connect live to Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung.
Good evening, guys. So it looks like winter is already here now. Earlier today, cold wave advisories were issued for some regions where morning lows dipped below 0 degrees, but that has now been lifted. And at the moment, we are under fairly clear skies due to a high pressure system from China. And besides that, dry weather watch continues to remain in Gangwon-do province, which has been extended to parts of Seoul as well as Gyeonggi-do. Make sure to dress warmly when heading out because this colder than the seasonal average weather will last through tomorrow morning. Other than that, it looks like daytime highs will rise back up to the seasonal average range towards the end of the week. On to Tuesday's readings. Seoul starts off the day at 5 degrees before hitting 18 in the afternoon. Cities down south also reach 18. On to other regions. Daejeon and Dokdo reach 15. Jeju peaks at 16. That's all the updates I have for Korea, and here's a look at the international weather.
And that's all from us now. Thank you and good day or good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. This has been Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Che. Thank you for choosing Arirang for this hour's news updates. We'll be back with more same time tomorrow.